This is the number one way you should be avoiding food sensitivities. So many of the clients or patients that I work with, many of them are dealing with food sensitivities or unpredictable food reactions, and they're eating the healthiest things that you could think of on the planet, and they're still getting weird rashes when they eat a kiwi, or they're eating bananas and Brussels sprouts and getting incredibly bloated. And they're always wondering, hey doc, why is it the healthier that I eat, the weirder these food reactions seem to be? And so if you're someone who's been dealing with food reactions and you're unsure of how to handle them and looking for strategies where you can improve your food sensitivities and know when and when not they're going to happen, this video is for you. So I'm a big fan. Elimination diets are pretty popular, but what isn't currently as popular, and I hope gains more popularity, is something called a rotation diet. So what a rotation diet, I mean, it's kind of in the name, but it involves rotating the kinds of foods that you're eating. And there are two primary types of rotation diets that I like to use with patients. Number one, this one is a little easier to follow, is a 2-week rotation diet. So what that means is you focus on not eating certain foods for 2 weeks at a time. And you specifically want to focus on foods that could be most problematic for you. So for me, I'm always wary of my nut butter consumption, oatmeal, and high histamine foods such as canned sardines, ripe avocados, and even more ripened bananas. So what I do for 2 weeks at a time is I try to reduce almost even down to zero my consumption of those foods. And after 2 weeks of not eating them, I'll bring those foods back in, and then I'll rotate out or I'll rotate away from foods such as eggs or wheat or even dairy products that I consume sometimes. And I'll follow similar cycles like that on and off for 2 weeks at a time. Now, for example, there are some foods that I will generally never rotate away from because I've found that my body can best handle them. And these are going to be things for me such as sweet potato, any sort of red meat or beef, and most berries. So I tend to rotate these foods out less often, if at all, really. And this type of rotation diet is far easier to follow, in my opinion, because it makes meal prep a lot easier, because every Sunday you can prep the same foods for the week, and then once a couple Sundays have passed, you can switch it up and then figure out the foods you want to rotate through. And it's a much easier start compared to the second big rotation diet, and that is the 4-day rotation diet that was made very famous by Paul Chek. If you guys are unfamiliar with Paul Chek, he is a wellness expert, a wellness guru that has done the research deep dives and clinical experience for decades upon decades. And I was watching one of his YouTube videos, ironically enough, this is hopefully on YouTube by this point, and he would basically, for his starting point with his people, would be a 4-day rotation diet. So you'd eat certain foods on Monday, eggs, bacon, and potatoes, and you could eat those same 3 foods all day, as much quantity as you want, eat those same 3 foods. The following day, so that Tuesday, you're going to eat completely different things. And then on that Wednesday, you're going to eat completely different things. And on Thursday, you're going to eat completely different things. So maybe on Monday, you have eggs, bacon, and white potato. On Tuesday, you have beef, broccoli, and sweet potato. And then on Wednesday, you would have something completely different. And by the time you come back to Friday, you can then reintroduce the eggs, bacon, and white potatoes. And I really like the approach, and I understand why he would incorporate things like that. But I think based on the population I work with, who are already pretty restricted dietarily, I think that's even harder to follow. Because from a meal prep standpoint, then you'd have to spend more time, potentially more money, because as you increase the amount of variety, you want to keep the food shelf stable longer, so it's hard to buy more food in bulk. So that could add up the price tag on the grocery bill a little bit. And then I just think it makes things logistically a little harder to follow because, it's Thursday, did I eat the same food on Monday? Whereas if you do a 2-week rotation diet, then you can literally write it on a note section or a whiteboard and say, hey, for this next 14 days, I'm rotating away from these 3 to 5 foods. And that's typically what I recommend to people to not feel super overwhelmed, is just to start somewhere with 3 to 5 foods. Now, we touched on elimination diets briefly, but now I want to touch on when you would incorporate an elimination diet versus just a food rotation diet. Elimination diets, as many of you might be familiar with, involve long-term removal of particular food groups. So this could be gluten, this could be dairy, this could be FODMAPs, this could be autoimmune paleo, where you're eliminating coffee and eggs and nuts and nightshade vegetables. And generally, the way I look at it is the more health issues that you have, I think the greater the likelihood that you're gonna benefit from starting off with an elimination style diet. And then I think rotation diets are fantastic for a preventative strategy to avoid food sensitivities in the long term. But if you're needing to correct current food sensitivities and you have a lot of them, I think an elimination diet is probably your best approach to use up front. And I always remind people that you don't have to be perfect with your elimination diet, and that way you can feel less stressed about the changes you're making. And the same goes for rotation diets. If you're trying to rotate away from, say, almond butter for a few weeks, and one night there's this delicious, sweet potato that just looks all lonely by itself, so you're thinking, I gotta throw a spoonful of almond butter on top of that just to, make sure it's not so lonely. That's okay. I always tell people, I think the 80-20 rule, which is thrown around a lot, is actually a fairly good tool to utilize, and I don't think most people are more like 50-50 or they're on or off the wagon. So I think 80-20 is sustainable for most people if they kind of get in the mindset of allowing themselves to have off time or even some of those off foods. And for some people, I think it's just easier mentally to eliminate 3 to 5 foods for 2 weeks or to rotate away from them for 2 weeks. And it just makes that decision-making process that much more simpler. Like, hey, I'm just not going to eat avocados for 2 weeks, or I'm just not going to eat almond butter for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, you go, hey, I'm going to eat almond butter or avocado in whatever quantity I feel my body needs. And this is great for people who suffer from decision fatigue and really like the black and white approaches to nutrition. Because yes, at the end of the day, nutrition is very gray. There's a lot of nuance. But for some people starting up front, or if you don't do this for a living and you do other things for a living, you like to sometimes have black and white approaches because that makes life a heck of a lot easier. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please leave it a like and leave a comment down below if you've ever had experiences with rotation diets or elimination diets. And subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. I'm really trying to put out great content around gut health and food sensitivities and just ways you can, trust in your gut to get your life back and to optimize your life and to be able to, help others with maybe similar issues. So as always, everyone, trust in your gut.